Today's video will discuss how top-down design relates to the agile software development methodologies. Hello, I'm James Helfrich. The traditional software development methodologies, first espoused by Winston Royce, describe a multi-step process where first we design, then we build, then we test. Now, this software development methodology has largely been supplanted by the agile family of development methodologies, where we design, build, and test in a very tight loop. The question is a top-down development methodology compatible with the agile software development methodology? This video will explore those differences. So the first step in this journey is to take a look at the Winston Royce's model, first defined in 1970. In this model, the first step is to do requirement solicitation. And when you're finished, you have a requirements document, which was assumed to be complete and correct. We call this a software requirement specification, otherwise known as SRS. The second two steps involve designing the system. This involved thoroughly designing every aspect of the system, from the high-level architecture all the way down to the small-level functions. When we're finished with this, we call it a software design specification, SDD. After the design is completely hashed out, then, of course, you actually write the code. When you're finished writing code, then you get around to testing. And when you're finished with testing, then you start supporting the system. Now, this method was called waterfall because, as you can see, each step kind of cascades into the next step as a series of waterfalls. Interestingly, Winston Royce never actually called this the waterfall method. In 2001, a collection of software engineers gathered in a ski resort in Utah to discuss what they call the software crisis. That namely, a increasing number of software projects were failing because they failed to meet the customer's needs. And from this, they came up with something they call the Agile Manifesto. And a key point of the Agile Manifesto is to favor working systems over documentation. And this is kind of a swipe against Winston Royce's views, where documentation were the key to managing large software projects. Are these two software creation philosophies at odds with each other? And how does top-down design relate to this? Let's take a look at this Agile philosophy. One of the key takeaways was something we call SCRUM, and SCRUM puts software development to a 2-week time box called a sprint. Here we do not have a requirement specification, but rather we have an individual called the product owner who personifies the requirements, and all inquiries about what needs to be built go to the product owner. At the beginning of every sprint, the product owner identifies a collection of user stories, sort of like requirements, that should be complete by the end of the sprint. And then the software development team will then finish these user stories one at a time, and by the end of the sprint, we'll demonstrate them back to the product owner. Now, how does this relate to Winston Royce's ideas? Well, one way to look at this is it is the whole software development methodology wrapped into a 2-week period of time where you repeat it again and again and again. So where does software design come into this? Well, let's take a look at the process of taking a large user story, which may take several days, maybe even a full week to finish, and break it into individual program entities. This process is non-trivial. Oftentimes, there's many different program entities involved in a single user story. So how does one break it up? Well, the answer is top-down design. At some point in time, you got to identify what the program entities are from these different user stories, and you kind of come up with a holistic idea of how you're going to go about solving this problem. So recall that Winston Royce's ideas was to come up with a holistic system design that covered the entire program. And so this software design description may be hundreds of pages long. This is in contrast with a sprint's design description, which is for a single use story, which may be only 5 pages long, maybe only a handful of views. The only difference here is the scale. The process is exactly the same. You can learn more about the top-down design methodology in the top-down chapter of the software design textbook.